What a perfect way to start tonight, the second week in Kaleo that we've been studying Job with the question, what am I going to do now? Forrest Gump. I think most of the world's seen it, right? If you haven't, it's an old classic. You basically have Forrest Gump, who was in Vietnam and basically saved his buddy's life, and that buddy at that moment, with life looking very different for the rest of his life, actually kind of would have rather died as a war hero and not had to navigate next steps, and that's why he was asking, what next? This suffering business would be nice if we would have just done last week and then moved on to something different, but I don't think Job is done with us yet. And it was interesting to me tonight, somebody walked in to UTZC, and you guys know this, but like 40 students set up all this stuff every single week because they like you and they want the best for you and they want to try to like create space where you can hear God. And the student walked up to me and they literally said, so we're going to suffer again tonight in Kaleo, huh? And I'm like, no, but we're going to talk about suffering. You know, it's just, I love the way that it was worded. We're going to suffer again, maybe. Last week I was laughing because if you stayed for the ending worship set, I don't know what was happening, but during worship, as people were really seeking God and praying, like some of the letters were blowing. I think it was the air conditioner, but suffering wasn't just static, it was dynamic. And I'm like, right? And then the G started to fall and kind of like twisted because one of the strings broke. And I didn't think it was appropriate, but I kind of want to be like, yeah, God's kicking the butt out of the G of suffering, you know. And I was desiring some hope really bad last week because if you were here, you heard me tell some really hard, heavy stories. And tonight there might be some of that, but it's not for shock and awe, and it's not to try to make misery, but it's supposed to relate that in this world we will have troubles. And what do we do with that? That story is fictitious. The hard thing about a Forrest Gump is we can study it or think about it and go, wow, that's powerful to see that somebody's trying to figure out what next. But what about when those type of things happen to everyday real people like you and me? I want to give you a psychological term that's been really helpful as I do pastoral counseling, and even as I read Job, and even as I look at my own life. There's something called death of a dream. Have you heard of it before? Some of the suffering that we talked about last week in my own story and other people's stories is just that. As I was preparing for this week and even getting ready for tonight, one of the stories is a family story for me that it wasn't to me, but to someone I really care about, and trying to figure out how to navigate it, how to talk about it with them, how to be present with them. And my daughter, since she's out of town and not here, I can now talk about her, which is a lot more fun, you know. And great soccer player, loved the game, and tore her ACL freshman year. Club, getting ready for high school soccer and a sport that she loves. And I don't know if you've ever done life with somebody who's been through a major surgery like that. The surgery is really just one of 100 more points down the road that you have to get through. And as a parent, to sit in a waiting room and, you know, the whole rehab area is wide open, and to watch the grimacing faces on like 20 people that are in that room going through all that for months afterwards trying to get strong. Anybody that at APU is ever on crutches, you see me walk up to you and almost eventually start having a little tear come down because I know what you have before you, and I have so much respect and strength for that. A death of a dream, not to be able to play high school soccer, is one thing, but then to be wearing a knee brace your junior year, playing soccer, excited that you conquered it, you came back, and playing a dirty soccer team where someone looks like they're out to throw their knees and chop somebody at a knee where they're wearing a knee brace. And I watched my daughter's knee, her ACL, torn a second time because someone took a cheap shot. And I'll never forget talking about that and trying to figure out why. What do you guys do with death of a dreams? The ones that you had in high school, or the ones that you're having now? Or what is it like to have these assumptions of what life should be like? Or even better yet, by the way, great songs, but I don't know why this series, every song you sing, I'm having to think about the lyrics. When it's talking about receiving the promises that God has for us, I'm wondering how often are the promises that I think God has for me are more about my own understanding and dreams for my own life, and I just want God to fulfill them. A death of a dream is when life doesn't look like what we think it's going to look like. And then the question is, what type of attitude are we going to have about that? Or what type of friend or even parent are we going to be with those that are going through something? If you guys do life with people, you will all find yourselves in a place of Job like the friends of Job. If you're really good at avoiding suffering, you probably won't have any good long-term friends because all friends go through stuff. And part of reading Job is hearing what the friends said and trying to figure out what to do with that. But then the other thing that probably a bunch of us need healing for in this space is to also realize that sometimes well-intentioned friends and sometimes not well-intentioned friends will tell us things that aren't helpful at all. And we actually need to be healed and have a new perspective of who God is, what the situation's like, and not own the stuff that has been unfairly placed on us. Does that make sense? Here's my goal for tonight, okay? It's not outrageous. I'm hoping that I might hint at enough stuff that someday when you need it, or even when you don't think you need it, but you need it down the road, so you do it anyways, is that some of you will be drawn to take the time to read and study Job. We're not going to do it justice at all tonight. I'm hoping more will be like, you got a sneak preview and you're willing somewhere down the road going, I remember Woody said I should read this someday, and maybe you'll read it. But I want to give you some hints of some stuff that's in there. If you weren't here last week, we read chapters 1 and most of chapter 2 where Job was a righteous man. That's what I love about all the commentators, all the really smart people that help me understand stuff will say, this guy wasn't being horrific and he didn't deserve his life to be turned upside down, but it was. And the way that it ended up being turned upside down is because the devil was out to destroy. The devil loves creating death of a dream moments. The devil loves to destroy. And basically, the whole gamble and bet was, hey, God, I bet you your servant won't stay faithful to you. And God trusts and allows all to happen in this moment that, yeah, he's faithful not just because I'm good to him. He's faithful because he follows me. And so there's a little bit of a wager. And all through chapter 1 and the second part of chapter 2, Job does not curse God. And I want you to hear the end of chapter 2 so we can pick up some of the stuff we'll talk about tonight. It goes like this, chapter 2, verses 11 through 13. Now, when Job's 3 friends heard of all these troubles, and by the way, these troubles is an understatement, that had come upon him, they met together to go and console and comfort him. When they saw him from a distance, they did not recognize him, and they raised their voices and wept aloud. They tore their robes and threw dust in the air upon their heads. They sat with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his suffering was very great. All right, straight up confessional in here. If anybody's ever complained that they had to do a whole afternoon with a grieving friend, you haven't done jack yet. 7 days and 7 nights, didn't speak up. They just sat with their friend that had lost all their kids, all their properties, all their livestock, cattle, their livelihood, everything. And at this point in chapter 2, Job had actually started to get sores all over his body where it says he took broken clay pots and used it to scrape away the irritation and the ouches. So can you imagine not only having something that's pussing and gross and nasty, but it itches and it hurts so bad that you're bleeding too because you cannot relieve the suffering that you're going through. Mental, physical, to the depths of his soul, Job is just dying inside. And his friends show up. Chapter 2, if you read it, and I could point out so many different verses and different things that it says, basically in the suffering, Job begs for relief. If you've ever read chapter 3 and some of the details that come up in chapter 3, basically the relief that Job is begging for is, God, why did you ever let me be born? The saddest, most heartbreaking language in Job pleading for relief, he said, I would have been better off to be a stillborn. This life is hard. If some of you ever feel like scripture or this thing called Christianity, faith, this understanding of God with the people of Israel, if it's like poured frosting on it and it's simple and easy and life is always good with smiley faces, you have not read Job, because Job is like, this life is hard. Relieve me, please. I'm okay to die right now. It's interesting, if you read this, remember I told you I'm hoping to spark something inside of you that maybe these scriptures will be helpful. If you read a lot of these chapters, be ready for Job's emotional roller coaster. If you like go on any popular page and like put up popular verses in Job, there are many times that a great verse will come up, but out of context, it doesn't really tell you what's going on. Job at moments is at his best and he's trying to claim who he believes and remembers God to be. And other moments he's right back at that lowly place. And because this talks about months and years of this tough time. When you think about an emotional roller coaster, when you got anxiety and denial and loss and then optimism and then laughter, one day you feel like everything's better and then you wake up the next day and something reminds you of something. If you are someone in this room who have been through an emotional roller coaster of just heartache and hope and joy and heartache and hope and joy, tonight, is it okay if I normalize for you that you're not alone and the human condition has that as a part of it sometimes? My goal tonight is not to say, here's 3 easy steps to get out of that so you could have the best roller coaster ride ever on the planet. It is instead to say, in some ways, if you have gone through this, if you are going through this, if someday you will go through this, you are not alone. Some theologians will talk about from one tree to another tree. In the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve chose their own way, not God's way. They ate the fruit. And between that tree and the tree of life in Revelation, when all things are made right and sin and brokenness and death and pain, that this journey through humanity is in some ways navigating with God how suffering is conquered. Not only in our own personal lives, but as really Christ followers and a whole world made right. It's kind of tough to wrestle with. I wish I could give you some easy formula that would make you go, nah, there's no suffering. Cool, I'm all good. But this normalizes the fact that if you've experienced this or gone through this, this is part of the story. Let me tell you some other stuff that you can hear the highs and lows in Job. Listen to chapter 7, verse 1 through 4. This is just going to be a sampling because there is so much in Job and we're only spending 4 weeks on it. Chapter 7, verse 1 through 4 say, do not human beings have a hard service on earth? And are not their days like the days of a laborer, like a slave who longs for the shadow, like laborers who look for wages? So I am allotted months of emptiness, and nights of misery are appropriated to me. When I lie down, I say, when shall I rise? But the night is long, and I am full of tossing until dawn. In this room tonight, I know there's people that can relate to that. Scripture sometimes help us with the language that we can't even speak on our own. Job was desperate. But listen to 27, when it seems like he rises to the occasion again. As long as my breath is in me and the Spirit of God is in my nostrils, my lips will not speak falsehood and my tongue will not utter deceit. Again, Job was a righteous man, but during the suffering, it was difficult days. Can I make you feel okay if now or in high school or in junior high or as a child, if you sit there and think, I am the only one that understands this language or this pain, I wish I could show you the emails and wish I could take a video shot of the comments that people grabbed me as I was walking across campus since last Wednesday. And basically were saying, I can relate. I got a story that's different, but I have pain too. And thanks for at least acknowledging it's real. If we jump into this is the best way to understand Job. Job's got 3 friends all the way up into chapter 27. There's a 4th friend, and it's pretty cool. 2 weeks from now, when you come back from mid-semester break, I need mid-semester break so bad. Mid-semester break helps suffering a little bit because hopefully you get more than 5 hours of sleep, right? I was talking to some students today. They were trying to convince me that they literally can sleep 20 hours solid without getting up. I can't do that. That's weird. That's really cool. It's like maybe afterwards you emerge like a butterfly or something, right? When you guys think about coming back from mid-semester break, Pastor Koba, a different voice, is going to come in and talk about chapter 28 and the fourth friend that has some comments back and forth with Job. But tonight, I want to just give you some hints about chapters 4 through 27, where really there's this back and forth conversation. And here's the biggest thing that I think God really stirred in my heart as I was trying to get ready to think through these friends. If you read some books and some commentators, I brought two that I might read something out of tonight. There are some that just demonize these friends like there's no tomorrow. And to be honest, some of the stuff that they say is so brutal, I kind of agree. We all have moments where like, that is no friend whatsoever. However, as I kept studying this, there were moments that I heard myself or my own voice take on what one of the three friends were saying at some point when I've tried to help somebody, and I found a different compassion in me, a different something inside of me that made me feel like, you know what, before I demonize those three friends, I might want to be willing to ask the question, not only do I want to navigate and figure out my own suffering or a language for my suffering, I better think through what it's like to journey with other people, because I could be as much a part of the problem in this life as these three were for Job. Listen to how brutal this is. This is Job at one moment. Again, I'm just going to give you little samplings. In Job chapter 16, listen to what Job says about his friends. You are miserable comforters, all of you. I wonder how long you'd have a friend if you kept saying that. Listen to chapter 13, verse 5. Job says this to his friends. If only you would be altogether silent. For you, that would be wisdom. The student that came up to me tonight and basically said, are we going to suffer again tonight? Quoted that verse to me, and it reminded me how funny it was. Basically, let me translate that into modern APU lingo. Shut up and go away. You're a bad friend, right? It's so poetic. If only you would be altogether silent. For you, that would be wisdom. Job is really struggling with these friends. But before we demonize them, will you think with me for a second? What did they do at the end of chapter 2? I have never sat 7 days and 7 nights in silence and weep with someone. I don't want to demonize them, but I also don't want to praise them, because we're going to talk about some things that they've done. What I want to do instead is say, what kind of friend to those that are suffering around me? It says that they wept with them. This is something we'll hit a little bit later. My question tonight for myself and for you is, has the tenderness of God and the compassion and the love and the sacrifice for somebody else besides yourself ever brought you to tears, even if you say, I don't cry? Here's a weird challenge that I wanted to throw out tonight. I understand if you don't cry, that some people are just not as emotive as others. But what would it be like not to cry for yourself, but to care so much for somebody else that something natural would happen in you, that your body feels an inkling of the massive amounts of pain of somebody else? You can't force that one. If any of you can force yourself to cry, please don't ever do it. That's a horrible idea. But what would it be like if a bunch of 18 to 35-year-olds that are thinking about, who puts a title suffering on a platform? That's just dumb, right? It's not going to be a real popular series long term. But if you will think through suffering, what would it be like for God to begin to stir something in you where you are one of a right kind of friend to journey with others and not one that needs to be told to be silent? That would be the wisest thing for you. Or someone that's going to be told you're not that great of a comforter. I found a picture that meant a lot to me, because you saw the earlier picture, and the three friends in the blue robes look kind of like jerks. I found this other picture, and I put this language, the council of friends. And in this picture, they look a little bit more thoughtful, confused. I'm not sure what to say. This is really hard. And I put the descriptors, the good, the bad, and I didn't use the word ugly. I put the good, the bad, and the horrific. Tonight, one of the things I'd love to do is hint to you some of the things that they said for you to think about, maybe one, to get healing for yourself, or maybe sometimes some people have placed something ill-fitting on you, or maybe something for you to think a little bit about, man, I got some friends and some people really going through some stuff. God, I need wisdom, what to say, what not to say, how to say it. And we won't go deep into that. It's more, again, just me trying to hint at some stuff in here that you can do this with. If you're bold and you have lots of free time and you happen to read Job and you come back and you're an expert and can help me and help Koba in 2 weeks with this, let me give you a little picture of what basically the Bible Project did. If you were to imagine Job, there's 3 different cycles in these chapters that I've mentioned. And there's 3 different friends. And each of those friends, there's always a call and response where they start telling a bunch of stuff to Job, and then Job has a reply, and then another friend has something to say. And in all 3 of those cycles, you can hear an ongoing dialogue that is all in poetry. Again, what I throw out to you is be really careful just to flip through and grab one verse and go, that's what I'm going to build my whole life on. Because you could be catching Job in the middle of his emotional roller coaster, but at least it's real language that we feel and can help us talk ourselves. Another way to think about when you read through this Job stuff is at moments it might sound like the friends are saying some truth that is pretty close to the truth, but in this context, in this setting, completely misses the point and actually harms deeply someone that's going through something. So the good, think about this. I hinted at it already. They showed up, they wept with him, and they took the time to be with the friend. Some of us, time is the most precious thing we have, and it's the hardest thing to give up. Do some of you have a friend that you just need to be okay that you're not going to have a fun weekend for the next 2 semesters before the school year's over because they just don't need to be left alone? I don't know about you, but right away I start getting selfish and going, give me back my time. I need my time. I got friends. I got things to do. But would God ever work in some of us to weep with, to spend time with, to not try to have quick answers for those that are suffering? The bad. They pointed blame. They claimed a clear cause and effect. Job 22:5 says this, "Is not your evil abundant? There must be no end to your iniquities." And one of Job's friends is basically piling up this argument of, we can't imagine you being righteous because something evil had to happen. Later on in Job 42:7 that we'll get to in 2 weeks, there is a moment when God speaks up to Job, but he also speaks up to the friends. And God basically says, have you not spoken wrongly about me? One of the things that I feel really convicted about is I just wanted to bring you some hints of what these friends were like, is in the horrific moments, in the bad moments, the last thing I ever want to do is represent God bad when someone's going through something. One of these friends urged prayer and to plead unceasingly. How many of you have ever gone through something really difficult and what you've gotten from well-intentioned friends is, God's always available. He'll show up on a dime. He'll do anything you can imagine. You just need to pray more and believe more. And then tried to practice that and live in that. And when it doesn't happen immediately, the first thing you can think of is shame and blame on yourself because you must not be doing it right. Sometimes when I talk about prayer, I like to talk about it this way. I don't believe God is trying to create a treasure hunt for us when it comes to prayer requests or as we look for God's will or we look for God's leading. I just don't enjoy imagining a God that goes, yeah, I got a will, I got an answer for your prayers, but it's a treasure. I'm going to hide it really hard. I'm going to enjoy you looking for it everywhere. And the more miserable you are, the more I enjoy that. I'm not real interested in a God like that. But when I had somebody say to me the other day, have you thought about prayer this way? What is it like to speak boldly and directly to God and say, God, I am in a difficult, suffering spot that I would love relief and I would love an answer what to do next. I can't imagine why you leaving me in this place might be something good for me. But God, what I trust more than when the answer that I want from you is you, if I don't get an answer, I'm not going to blame myself for going about it the wrong way. I will keep asking for an answer and waiting for you. Because a lot of times what happens in our prayers, we either start blaming God or we start blaming ourselves, and we completely miss the point of that trust space of going, this is difficult, but I will continue to wait in this and seek and not think this is some miserable treasure hunt that I can't find God. If some of you are like, Woody, you don't understand how frustrated and mad I am and things that are going on, can I even give you one more hint? Do you love how I'm just bouncing all over the place, 28 chapters, because we can't even do justice to it? If you look at the middle of chapter 6, there's a bunch of stuff on Job's reply. But then if you look at the end of chapter 7, there's 2 words in verses 20 and 21 that really make me feel good that I can be honest with God. It says, why? Why? Why have you made me a target? Have I become a burden to you? Why do you not pardon my offenses or forgiven my sins? Why won't you change this? Early on, I was trying to encourage some of you that are going through difficult times that it doesn't mean you're broken or messed up. I think the other thing I'd want to encourage tonight is it's okay to ask why. But don't end it with then, I must be doing it wrong. And don't end it with, I guess God's a miserable treasure hunt kind of God and he enjoys me roaming around endlessly. Maybe end with a why, I still don't understand, but at least I'll keep directing my whys to you and I'll continue to journey in this because I don't understand the mysteries of God and I'm not God. And that's really hard, but why? It's honest talk. What I thought I'd do tonight is do what we did last week, because some of you told me you really appreciated it. I asked just a couple of those on the Kaleo band to sing a more quiet, thoughtful song related to the things we're wrestling with. To give you permission to stay seated and think through what they're singing about. To join in if you want to, or just process and think, what kind of friend have I been to others as I journey through suffering with them? What kind of things have people told me that were probably maybe ill-fitting, like, if you love God enough, God will answer you quickly. No, it didn't happen. That probably wasn't the right thing to say. Or, you better keep digging deep. There's got to be some hidden sin in you, or there's no way you would have failed that test, even though you didn't study for it. Think about what's been said to you, and does it really point you to the right God? Or is it based on a death of a dream, false expectations and hopes, and things that just drag you down? Take some time to think as you kind of journey through the song with these 4. And then the other thing that I think I want to do tonight, but I'm a little hesitant, so how about I take just 2 minutes to overqualify it? One of the things we've been doing is over there is a cross. If you were here last week, the cross was over there. It is Lent. It's the 40 days before Easter, and we're trying to remember a God that suffered for us. The disciples could have said the God that suffered alongside us. No movie clip ever does justice to who Jesus was or what Jesus went through, but at moments it can hint at, oh wow, I think I quickly forget this and come up with my own version of what this must have been like. When they're done singing, there was a Hollywood producer that did their best to try to tell the gospel story of who Jesus was. And in Son of God, I want you just to see for a little bit during the Last Supper the anguish and the suffering and the pain that Jesus, the Son of God, was going through on our behalf. It's not the same as Job. It's a different suffering. It's for our sake. But we have a God who is dealing and working with this thing called sin and this planet, not by avoiding suffering, but navigating it, living in it, and taking it all the way to its full course of death and then resurrection so that it will not be the final theme. I want you to see and maybe think about Jesus' suffering as one more piece of what we're talking about tonight. Sing the song with them, or just listen to this, or we'll talk a little bit more when they're done. As we've been going through Job, I've felt like each night we would need to consider the suffering of Jesus. Not to say that Job's suffering, our suffering, is like Jesus' suffering, but to say we have a God who is working in the middle of the mess to save us. I hold in this series called Job both the angst of what do you tell your 17-year-old daughter who worked really hard the first time to go through ACL, and what do you tell her the second time the ACL is torn? And I live with the hope and the joy that this Jesus has conquered the grave, that we can have power to navigate in the both stories. Jesus, obedient to the Father, was willing to suffer for you and I. The story of the cross, and the reason we have it up during this, is because you have a God that did not avoid the suffering of planet Earth. One of the things that's so powerful for me that I've appreciated about different traditions as I've traveled different places and gone to different churches and parishes with family members is that no one tradition holds everything right. If in your tradition you have the crucifix present that you get to see, you see a suffering Savior still on the cross. I think in many ways, to not have this as one of the stories and examples of our faith really misses the fact that Jesus suffered. If you've grown up in a place, whether Anglican or Lutheran or Catholic or Orthodox, you've, as a little kid, gone into places and looked up and saw this actual body hanging on a cross. And what goes through your mind about suffering is something different than when you see an empty cross. But that empty cross is just as important as the other. As we're talking about Job, both the crucifix and the empty cross are part of the same story, that our God has not avoided suffering, and our God will not let suffering be the final narrative for all eternity. What does that look like on a day-to-day basis? Really hard and really hopeful. Tonight you've heard it's okay to say why. You have heard it's okay to be on an emotional roller coaster. It is okay as a friend to just sit and cry and weep and do life with someone. But like a great theologian by the name of Gustavo Gutierrez, as he worked with those in South America, says, one of the most important things we could ever do is to figure out a language about how to talk about God when we're going through suffering. That's what Job's about. And actually, that's what Jesus Christ is about. Tonight, you guys are on the verge of a whole week off. Tonight, some of you have so much to accomplish that you can't even imagine how to make it through. Tonight, I asked the Kaleo band to sing 2 songs, and if you sing one, get out of here. If you need to sing a second, stick around. But as the band is coming up, I want to pray for everybody here in 2 ways. Do me a favor. They feel awkward and walk up here while you guys are sitting there staring at them. So why don't they come up and you stand up all at the same time? Ready? Perfect. And here's the question that I want to ask you. All the way from the west side to the east side to the south side to the north side. Okay? Where have good or bad intentioned friends harmed or fouled you in your journey of suffering? Tonight, on behalf of all Christ followers, can I say, sorry, please forgive those that do not know what they're doing. And I want to pray for you tonight. And those of you that are going through suffering right now and would die to have somebody just sit and cry and do life with you, I want to pray that God would provide the friend that you need in this season. And for those of you that think that God doesn't know or doesn't care about suffering and hasn't done anything about it, I want to pray tonight that you might remember the crucifix cross and the empty cross and remember the one named Jesus that was raised from the dead. Lord, I pray over Kaleo. I pray over the north room. I pray over the west side, the south room way in the back, and even the east. Would no person in here believe lies about their suffering? Give them wisdom. Give them a language to understand and talk about suffering. And God, would we feel free and honest to go directly to you with our whys? God, forgive us when we've been the bad friends. Help us to be patient and sit and journey with people. And God, I pray tonight that maybe this first song or the second song might be healing for somebody or hope for somebody in the midst of all these things. God, bless this crowd. Watch out for them. Join them in their suffering, even as they head into mid-semester break. In Jesus' name, amen. How about this? I promised somebody that if they had to get out of here at 10, they could. If you want to sing and pray, do it. And if the best thing you could do is go write a paper, just head out quietly. May the Lord bless you and keep you. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Be with us as we go, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.